Hey guys, it's been a while since I've done one of these, but I wanted to share a couple pearls I got from my experience last week at the Hardrock 100. It was a really, really cool event. I think it was totally different than Western States, whereas I think Western States is like truly a race. Yes, it's historic and it's on a historic mining trail, and all that's really cool, but Hardrock's different. It's like this kind of grand mountain tour that happens to also have this competitive element to it. But it was really interesting. And for me, it was good to kind of overcome a little bit of my high alpine fears. We were able to do a couple of really nice, well, one really nice kind of hike up and run down to Island Lake and Ice Lake, which is one of the iconic places on the course. And then I got a chance to pace a friend of mine for 16 miles in the middle of the course. Between those experiences and watching the people who did really well, I came away with a few lessons that I think that are really important to pass on. So what it takes to do well at Hardrock, I think, is what it takes to do well at kind of all ultras, and then you could kind of zoom out and say, what does it take to do well at all running events? But for something like Hardrock or for any hilly ultra, it really comes down to, let's say, at least two things. But number one is this kind of forward engagement. You know, watching Killian perform and watching the top end guys perform, the key to getting up the hill, well, the key to the race really is kind of efficiently powering up the hill and then kind of light and efficiently getting down the hill as well as you could. So the forward engagement component, and Killian does this so well, as both a runner and a hiker, what that does is it gets the work into the hip. And it's really interesting. It's like, I'll see a lot of people, and I do this too, I'm chief among them, I'll kind of be here going up a hill. It's like, oh yeah, I'm leaning forward, but you're really not. It's got to feel almost like you're here. And the steeper the hill, the more important it is to get here, because it's like that hill's kind of coming at you and you have to counter it with this forward lean. And why that's so important is it shifts the load to the glutes. Now I'm going to tilt this down, because if we fail to do that, what tends to happen, especially when we hit a hill, is it gets much more difficult to keep that tall. So if we're not tall, then we start to sink down. If we sink down and go backwards, you can kind of see there's a lot of pressure and tension in my knees and tension in my calves. And that's a prime way to blow out your quads and to have either calf cramping, foot issues, you name it. So if we're stuck down here because that hill is super tall, we got to get here. And that's what he does so well as those other top guys. And even the guy that I paced, Stephen Moore, did that like outrageously good, because when I picked him up at mile 56, he was hiking about as fast as I wanted to go, and I was pretty fresh. And he did such a good job of being in this position. So that forward lean or forward momentum with that good kind of trunk posture is really important. You're utilizing the hips, and the hips will go all day. You've got to preserve the quads and below. So that was another big thing, or issue number one, or goal number one. Number two was this efficient, cyclical stride on the downhill. This was reinforced to me at Western States as this really critically important thing to preserve quads. But at Hardrock, it almost becomes a speed issue, because it's so technical and so steep, and you might be lucky at 13,000 feet to go 20 minutes a mile uphill. Well, you've got to be able to use that downhill. These downhills are a gift, and you have to think of it that way. And if you're not able to do anything more than this the whole day, you're really not going to get very far very fast. And this is what Killian does so well, and this isn't necessarily like this next level, like elite technical skill. It's simply being able to have a good running stride. And what that means is you're going downhill. Can you do this? And have this circular nature. Number one, it just begins with your ability to lift your leg. And almost all of you at some point have gotten the 100 up runner hop drill from me. And that's kind of where it starts, because for your body and your brain to be confident to lift this high, which is really where that cyclical starts, it's got to be confident that if you're this high, this leg's going to balance you. So the 100 up or any sort of kind of agility exercise that's going to work on your ability to be strong in one leg is super important. But then it just kind of comes down to practicing that and having that circular stride. And what the circular stride does is twofold. Number one, when you're circular, you gobble up like a ton more ground. If you're kind of doing this, you're not getting very far very fast. But if you can kind of wind it up, you can really gobble a lot of ground fairly quickly. And that may be the difference between a 16-minute downhill a mile in an 8-minute. And for the section that I did with Stephen Moore, who's a really accomplished runner from Austin that I know from the Red, White, and Blue camp, we did 10 miles straight of uphill and 6 miles of downhill. So there wasn't a whole lot we could do. He did a fantastic job hiking uphill, but a lot of that just wasn't runnable. So, well, what do? It's like, okay, you've done what you can do. Now the key is, can you use that downhill to the best of your ability? And the guys and the gals who did the best at Hardrock were those that, number one, they didn't blow their quads out on the uphills because they were here, and then on the down, they kept that cyclical. It's just so important. There's a reason that so much of the training that you guys do is not only, yes, it's hill training, but it's a very kind of form discipline. And I want to impart on you guys how important that is and why that is, because so much of these ultra races, these beautiful things, these challenging things that we want to do, has much more to do with skill development and execution of those specific skills than it has to do with fitness. So that's really important. The other thing that's really important about why we need to be doing the cyclical is it gives such a nice break to this tissue in here. So we're kind of stuck down in here, and maybe you've been hiking for 2 hours straight or 3 hours straight like we were. Even if you're doing the right thing, the quads feel stiff, the hamstrings feel stiff. So to be able to really kind of stretch it out is such a good thing to do. And it also kind of limits the overstride stress, because even if you're running downhill, even if you're not kind of suicidally leaning forward into the steep downhill, even if you're here, if you can do this, that overstride stress is so much less if you land here versus kind of just being here. Because even if I'm here, if I'm low swinging my leg, I'm going to land there. So keep that in mind. You know, every one of you guys is going to be doing some uphill work. And with that comes some downhill. And for some of you, it's more important than others. But efficient running comes down to two things. It's forward engagement, it's rearward propulsion, and it's something like as iconic and outrageously challenging as Hardrock. Those are the two biggest skill sets that I saw. Simple things, not easy, but simple things that you can do that are really critical for peak performance. So those are like the two big kind of form takeaways that I got. The other interesting thing is what happened with Killian and his shoulder. So Killian dislocated his shoulder, and that's a big deal for a lot of reasons. And I have a little bit of experience with this because my girlfriend has actually dislocated her shoulder on a run, and I had to put it back into place. And it can be really painful, not necessarily the popping out, but the result. It's almost like spraining an ankle, and now it's kind of loose, and it's just going to be really sensitive. So what struck me as both of a runner, coach, but also as a PT, isn't necessarily that he was able to continue. It's not like he broke his ankle, but I think what would have been painful for him was any little, technical dissent, and maybe he wanted to do something like that, or these kind of micro balancing things that we'll do with our arms and that he does. I would think that would have really bugged him. But if you watch the video, and I'm going to find there's a Solomon Instagram video that I'll post to this, the reason it didn't matter a ton to him is really at the foundation of how we want an efficient arm swing. And I've been working with this on a lot of clients, but what an efficient arm swing comes down to is it's a little trunk wiggle, but it's quite a bit, and I'm going to come down here and show you this, it's quite a bit of shoulder blade. So I bring this arm back, and I want to kind of impart on you guys, here's my hands covering my shoulder blade. When that arm comes back, you see how my shoulder blade kind of goes down and in, and then it kind of goes down and forward. Same thing over here. There's the shoulder blade, down and in, down and forward, or down and back, I should say, that direction. So what really struck me about the video that I saw of him later on when he had his arm in a sling is he was still doing that. He wasn't doing this, because that's really inefficient. He wasn't doing what a lot of runners do, which is this, where everything's kind of locked out, or they're kind of locked out here. He wasn't doing this. He was still here. He just had that arm in a sling, and he was doing this. And I can demonstrate that with my hands in my pockets. This is an efficient arm swing. Shoulder blade back, shoulder blade forward, shoulder blade back, shoulder blade forward. That. Again, and forward, you can kind of watch the notch in my shirt. That. So from a propulsive general efficiency standpoint, he stayed efficient. He just lost this lever as a balance, and it was probably, maybe if he was lucky, it wasn't, but it was probably painful just whenever that ball would kind of want to leave that. So that was really interesting, but an interesting observation on form and how good he was, even though he had to suffer through that. So just some really cool stuff. It is a really, really cool event. I think we have a really tremendously cool sport, endurance running in general, but the ultra trail running. But the cool thing for me that I always come back to is even the more extreme the event, the more kind of just, if anything, that extreme is the crucible for truth. And what needs to happen at Hardrock is what needs to happen in your next marathon, and so on. So those are the takeaways, and I hope that they'll help you. Take care, guys.